Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Acquire Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Wright. And this is the podcast where we talk about list building and lead generation, sales and marketing, and all the fun stuff in between, all around, and up and down. Don't ask me why I said that, but it sounded fun. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to share that if you're trying to figure out what your next list build will be or the way that you're going to attract new potential clients, I want you to think about how you're going to do this and plan it out. And one of the ways that you can do this is get my guide with the 5 steps on planning your next really successful event, which you can grab from the link in the show notes. So go and do that. And now let's talk to our amazing guest, a good friend of mine who had just had a lovely 15-minute conversation before hitting record, which I love to do, is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Jenny, I got to go download that thing. Oh my gosh, I haven't done that quite yet. You got me on it.
Absolutely, go and grab it. So, Jenn, I love talking to you because you have so many skills. You've been doing so many things, but one thing that you're really, really amazing at, which I love to talk about, is that you help entrepreneurs speak more clearly, consistently, and confidently, both on stage and on camera, and get paid for their expertise. You've been doing this for what, about a decade now?
Well, I've been speaking for about a decade, but I've been coaching other speakers for about 3 years.
Amazing, amazing. And actually, I have to say that that last year, back in well, actually at the time that we're recording this, so back in 2023, I had been asked to be speaking on a stage, and I was a little bit nervous because it was like the first time on stage since the pandemic, and I was a little bit reticent. You and I jumped on a call. We sort of planned out what I was going to talk about, which was great. I'm glad we did that, even though when I actually did speak, my PowerPoint actually wasn't functioning because of the battery issue, and I still had to riff, but your help was immensely supportive, and I really appreciated it.
I love success stories, so thank you for sharing that. And I believed in you the whole time, Jenny. I'm so glad you took me up on the opportunity to chat a little bit because we don't know what we don't know. And if you've been out of the game for a minute, you probably could learn a thing or two. So I appreciate that you were willing to have that conversation.
100%. I'm one of those people that if I need help, I'm just going to ask for it. I have no shame. I just have no shame on that. I don't think anybody should. So let's dive in and talk about list building and lead gen using the methods that you talk about. One of the things that I think you're really, really great at is the clarity piece, making sure that people have that confidence to speak about the thing that they're really great at without worrying necessarily about all that ancillary stuff that kind of gets us bungled up. So, talk to me about what hangs people up when they're trying to speak confidently, either from camera or from stage, and what you'd suggest to kind of get around it.
I think the biggest thing that people get stuck on, if you will, is first, what will I say? But
Mm.
second, what will people think of what I will say? And the problem with that is we don't know what people will think. We're not asking them. If we're not asking them, then we probably should change our pre-event um, processes a little bit so that we do understand what they might say before we show up. But if we don't have that in place, it's okay. And most people are cheering for you. If you're on stage in front of them, you're sharing content that they want to learn more about. They want you to succeed and they want you to share the best of what you got. Now, you've got a lot of really good stuff. So, again, we go back to that original question, what do I say? And I see one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people do when it comes to speaking is they kind of custom create a bajillion different topics, a bajillion different ways to talk about these topics. Unfortunately, that means that your message is unclear because you're talking about so many different things that nobody knows at the end of the day what that one thing you talk about is. And that means you're not going to be invited to as many stages.
Hmm. I don't think I really looked at it like that before. That's fantastic. And how many people actually get stuck the way that you just described? A lot?
Everyone. I even have clients who are working with me, Jenny, and they're like, oh, someone asked me to present this topic for their group. And I'll ask them, I'll be like, is that your signature speech? And they'll say, oh, no, that's not my signature speech. That's not what we've been working on together. That's not what will help me grow my business, either through building my list or through inviting people to take that next step with me. So if you are looking at a potential stage opportunity, that is a great question to
Hmm.
determine whether it's a yes or no for you. Will this topic or delivering this topic to that audience help me grow in the way that I wish to grow?
Okay, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people, I think everybody knows that the benefit of speaking is fantastic. And I don't know what you say, but I'm a little bit of the whole suck it up buttercup with the speaking thing. And I'll tell you why. And I think you might know this story. I think that if you have nervousness or you don't think what you talk about is any good, or you're worried that nobody will listen, or I mean, in my case, when I speak from a stage, I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody's gonna be looking at their phone. They're not gonna be listening to me. I always think that you don't know until you try it. Secondly, you can always improve it to make it better. But the big thing that I always think about is if you don't do it, you're robbing people of the thing that they actually need, right? So many people speak about the things that you talk about, but nobody talks about it from the angle that you do. And
Mm.
if you come at it from, hey, you know what? If I don't do this, I'm absolutely robbing people of the gift that I provide, then it becomes the non-negotiable. Then it's just, I got to do what it takes to make it happen. Instead of, I don't know, I'm not sure, and having that sort of like feeling. At least that's what works for me. And I don't think it works for everybody. But if I make it a non-negotiable and just go like, screw it, F it, whatever, I just got to do it because like my ideal audience needs the message, then it's no longer about me.
Mm.
And
That's the best way to approach it, actually. And
yeah.
we hear this all the time, right? The question comes up on social media or wherever you're hanging out. What could you speak about for 45 minutes with no preparation and complete passion? It's not about passion. I'm sure you have passion about a lot of things, and some of them are things that you might be delivering on stages, and other things you might just be having a one-to-one conversation with one of your besties, you know? So it's important to understand that, yes, your message should have a purpose, and you are not the hero of your message. And this is a difficult one because I built my business with my personal story of losing 100 pounds. So that's why my company is called Weightless.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I shared this with you, Jenny, but when I first started my company, I was sharing how I lost 100 pounds, and I had no intention of coaching anyone at that point. I just wanted to get on more stages. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was a little unclear what the next step of that conversation looked like as a speaker. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wasted a lot of time, unfortunately, and I wasted some of those stage opportunities because I was focused on me. And that was not the way to do it. Nobody cares that I lost 100 pounds. I mean, maybe they did. They cared on some level, but what they really cared about was, if I were to try to do something like what Jenn just described, how would I be able to do that? And so I did have people in my audience come up to me. Sometimes they were very emotional about it and would say, Jenn, I really want to do something differently in my life. I really want to change something. How do I work with you? Now, if you start having people coming up to you and saying that after you're on a podcast, after you're on a panel discussion, after you share a live stream or a masterclass, then you know you're delivering the right message.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that that's sort of the proof. And if you, like you said, if you kind of take yourself out of it a little bit, although I do, and you might agree with me, I do like using a little bit of story from the person to validate the topic. And it doesn't have to be, and I'm sure you've heard this too, like how about those webinars where the first 20 minutes is the story of the person's life and how they sit on a beach drinking Mai Tais and they make money in their sleep, right? Like, come on, we don't need to validate like that. I can give you validation in 5 minutes of the fact that I'm qualified to speak about the thing.
Interesting. So this concept of validation is something that I tell my clients to not worry about. And here's
Oh
why.
yeah, cool.
When it comes to validation, you should never introduce yourself when you're going on stage. You should have a prepared biography. If you don't have one, or if it's not too long, we can certainly have a conversation about what that could look like for you. But always make sure that someone else introduces you when you get up on stage. If you need to prove anything else beyond that point, the proof should be in the results of the stories, the case studies, the examples
Yes.
of how you help people. But you're not validating your right to be on stage.
No,
Everyone
definitely
has a right
not.
to be on stage. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And having somebody like be your hype person as you get on stage is awesome. Uh,
Yes.
but if you're doing, if you're on somebody's summit or if you're on a webinar, you may not have that person doing that necessarily, or at least not in the right sort of format. A lot of people or hosts of summits kind of lead you in with a little bit of the bio. And if you're on a
Yes.
webinar, you got to introduce yourself. So how do you kind of overcome that? I think, it's quick validation, or let the results speak for themselves, which I think is always also a really great idea. I gotta ask you, like, you've been doing this for a while now. What are some of the things that you see people doing that you're just like, dear, dear, whatever, can you not do that? Like, what the crap? What do you see that just because you're giggling, right? If you're not listening, if you're not watching this, Jen's having a good giggle. What are people doing that you just want to put up your hands and freak out about?
Yes. And okay. So don't make these mistakes, because I probably have made a million of these mistakes, and I probably had someone who was cringing listening to me make these mistakes. So I'm including myself within this company. But one of the top things, especially in the online space, so I host a lot of, webinars for other organizations, international associations, things like that. And typically they have a webinar format between 60 minutes and 90 minutes. And they usually include a specified amount of Q&A time at the end. Please don't use that Q&A time at the end of your presentation, because you're missing the opportunity to make it easy for people to take the next step if you end on a Q&A. Here's what's going to happen on a Q&A. You're going to have crickets, because people are heading out and multitasking on their phones and stopped paying attention, or maybe they have already left the webinar. That's what's going to happen. If it's a recording, it's going to be dry, dead time. Nobody's going to keep listening for the Q&A session, because if their question is not being asked, they don't need to know what the answers are for some of those things. Not everyone wants to listen for 2 hours long to a webinar. So please don't end on a Q&A, especially in the online space. It's not interesting. It's not engaging. There are ways you can take people's questions from minute 3 of your presentation, so that
Yes.
people who are there want to stay there and want to be there with you and are like, okay, but what about this piece of it? Because you may not be addressing that in your content. So make sure you're addressing what they're looking for in the first 5 or 10 minutes of whatever you're talking about. That
Makes
is
me so happy.
huge.
Yeah, huge.
I
Absolutely
can see your
huge.
happiness there.
Yeah.
Another thing, because we talked about validation just now, a lot of online formats will, let's jump right into the content. I'm no fluff, I'm zero BS, all of these things. But you do have to somehow put something about your personal connection to the content. So I usually include a slide, if I'm using slides, a few minutes into the presentation. So after I tell them, here's what we're going to be going into, which of these do you really want to learn more about? Here is the introduction to the topic, by acknowledging why they're in the audience, why they're listening. And then after a few slides of getting into the content, I might be like, oh yeah, this is me. This is why I'm here. This is why this is really important for me, because it's really important to me to establish trust. And by the way, I put my slides down for this part because they can see me face to face. Look into your camera, make sure you're making those connections. Even if you can't see them on the other end, you are making connections. So the more intimate you can make it feel while you're on stage, no matter whether that stage is physical or virtual, it's going to make the trust factor that much higher.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, people make that mistake of keeping the Q&A to the end a lot.
So frustrating.
A
I don't
lot.
even know why they asked to do that anymore. Honestly, that's so dinosaur.
It is. And I was asked to come speak in somebody's Facebook group. It was like a Facebook group with like 60,000 people. And I was asked to give a presentation, then do a Q&A at the end. And I was like, nope, not doing that. I was like, hey, everybody, ask your questions while we're doing this. And I think the right way, because if people feel like their questions are being answered whilst you're doing it, whilst you're presenting, then the next question could come up, which could be the thing that reduces the barrier to entry to your program, product, or service just by you answering it in the moment. And I think that's probably the better way to go. What would,
Absolutely. Can I share one more little tidbit that I
oh,
just
please, like
learned?
more. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I'm experimenting with this, so I'll check in with me if you want to learn about the results from this. But I was reading a book by Donald Miller, who is all about how to build your coaching business. And he brought up a good point, because speaking is part of how he builds his business. And he said, if you mention your lead generator, your opt-in, your lead magnet, whatever you call the beautiful free gift that you're offering as a speaker, you have to have a free gift, please. No one's going to say no to your free gift.
No.
But when you offer that, make sure you offer it a minimum of twice during your presentation. So maybe once in the beginning part of it and once at the end. That is another big problem I see a lot of people do, not necessarily with their lead magnets, but with their offer or their invitation, is they stuff it in the last 5 minutes of the presentation. And we've already learned that people are not paying attention by the time you hit the end of the presentation. So please, if you want to grow your community, if you want to invite people to take that next step with you, you probably need to have further communication with them. And the best way to do that is through your lead magnet.
Completely agree. And yeah, I mean, I think just mentioning it once and doing it really quickly at the end, hoping that's going to be sufficient, is definitely not the way to go. And I've got to ask you, the whole fear of people not listening to you if you're speaking on stage, people not enjoying what you're talking about, having the sort of the, I guess, the anxiety to be building while you're having, doing your talk. How do you help people with that? Because it does happen. People naturally do look at their phones, you know, and that's okay if they do that. But how do you help people overcome that fear?
So there should always be a little bit of fear. If you're not feeling fear, perhaps you're not as personally invested in it, you're not as excited about it, because we know that fear can easily turn into excitement and vice
Mhm.
versa. Excitement can also turn the corner into fear. So you absolutely should care, and that could be fear or excitement for you about what you're presenting. In terms of how I help people, it's all about being very clear on your signature speech. So your topic is probably already chosen. If you're listening to Jenny, I know you've got a topic. I know you've delivered that topic to other people. And if you're not getting the results you want from that particular topic that you're delivering, it could be in the format and structure of how you're offering that or how you're delivering that. So we would work one-to-one together and kind of clarify what that looks like. So there's a particular progression we follow when it comes to delivering our content, and it's not the same as it is for content curation. So if you're
Mhm.
rocking it with social media and all those things, great. If you're doing short form video, great. It's not quite the same as a signature speech, which is why I have a signature speech template, because I identify those key elements for you. Some of them are revisiting from, English class back in high school, but it's a little different element of it. And I also encourage you to have regular touch points of engagement with your audience, which we often forget about if we're in talking head mode. Come on, social media has allowed us to be very much talking heads. If we're in that mode, we're going to forget to engage our audience. So this signature speech template has the format, the structure, different ways to engage people, and also a critical look at what do you really want public speaking to do for you? I've had
Mhm.
clients who say, I want to earn $5,000 per speaking engagement. Awesome. The way you approach that is very different than how you would approach it if you're like, I want 500 new people to my email list. That's a very different approach. So you have to know what you want to get to and how you want public speaking to help you grow before you can develop the best experience for your audience.
Okay. So you said something that makes me going, like, I'm now going to pivot this conversation because
Ooh.
you mentioned, if you don't know what your goal is, figure out your goal. Do you want 5,000 people, 5,000 per speaking event or people on your list? Let's talk about how to get paid. Let's talk about that. I know that's a topic that people want to talk about. We've talked about how to add leads to your list. Speaking does it. Go speak. But how do you get paid for it? How do you get that 5K speaker fee? What's the process? What's the best way that you've been able to do that?
Yeah, and this is Secrets from Professional Speaking. I've been doing this for a while. I've had many conversations with other professional speakers. So, you are competing with people who are used to getting paid to speak. It's no longer the just posting I'm looking for paid speaking. Who do you know who you can connect with me with? That's not how you do it, okay?
Okay.
Like people who have found leads that will pay them to speak care a lot about their people, and they're not going to just introduce any Tom, Dick, and Harry to this person who has trusted them with their content and trusted them with their platform. You have to build those relationships first. So yes, you can certainly ask and ask away, but people who have put in the hard work are not necessarily going to suddenly introduce you to the fold because they don't know who you are as a speaker and what you deliver.
Sure.
There is a process I walk folks through, and I offer this through masterclasses on Eventbrite. If you're curious, you can follow me there. I want you to have a system of staying booked as a speaker, because it's great when you have the single invitation to a stage and it's an amazing experience. Applause, applause, everything goes well. But what if you did that every month? What if you did that every week? That's what I want for the people that I work with. And the way to do that is to be consistently making the right connections in the right industry with people who are already hosting events and who have a budget to work with. And there's different things we look at in terms of how to determine whether they have a budget. Now, here are a few things I'll throw your way, some tidbits. If you're looking at presenting in the back of a Devani's Pizza House or whatever in a restaurant, that's probably not a paid speaking engagement. If you're in Las Vegas at Aria, which is a higher end hotel out there, there's probably a budget for that. If there's multiple sponsors for the event, there's probably a budget because those sponsors paid money to sponsor the event. And there are other ways to determine. It's not the size of the audience. A lot of people focus too heavily on the size of the audience. Like, I want to speak to a stadium of 15,000 people. You might have to pay for that stage. Like, not all of those stages are ones that will pay you to show up. So it's not the size of the audience. It's the need for the event organizer. How badly do they need your topic? How relevant is your topic to what they want to deliver to their audience? And then the motivation in terms of why the audience is gathering. If they're just gathering for a one-time event, probably not as big a budget, probably not, they won't cover travel, they won't cover some of the other costs of getting to the venue or staying at the venue. But there are smaller groups like masterminds, retreats that will pay you to show up and deliver a topic that they have not heard or has not been delivered in the way they need it to. So just some things to consider.
Okay. Well, I mean, so this makes me think about, should people have, okay, actually, this makes me think, should people be paying to be on some of those sites where it lists them as a quote unquote preferred speaker? Or is it really kind of guerrilla marketing and trying to find and reach out and connect with people? Do you recommend that people pay to be on those sites?
Yes or no. It just depends on your model. So, for example, if you're someone who is only looking for paid speaking engagements, it benefits you to be found everywhere online with other speakers who are getting paid. So that's when being listed on a directory like eSpeakers or SpeakerFlow or Speakertunity, one of the many options out there. There are quite a few opportunities for that where you can be listed as a speaker. There's even virtual ones. I know of one called Ecosystem. Connect with me if you're curious, but I can connect you with different virtual speaking opportunities as well. I have a list of handouts that I'm happy to share with anyone who's listening. No opt-in, I'll just send it to you. But if you want to compete with other paid speakers, hang out where other paid speakers are hanging out, which is NSA, National Speakers Association, International Speakers Network, Global Speakers Talk. These are all places where paid speakers are hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you have to be in the same room to get the same access to opportunities, but they know some things that maybe you don't quite know yet. So it benefits you to collaborate, to learn where they're showing up. Plus, these directories have access to SEO resources that you as a solopreneur or entrepreneur may not have access to or have not taken time to delve into yourself. I know a little bit about SEO. I've been on some directories in the past. And also, just to get back to it, Jenny, nothing will replace direct guerrilla marketing. So it's fine to be listed in all the places, but if you are not taking the action steps to get actively in front of people, it won't matter. You can
No.
be on all the sites and nobody's going to find you anyway.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I'm still very much on the hands-on side for getting speaking gigs, and I will do the grill. I will do the legwork to find it. And I have been using a bit of ChatGPT actually to make this easier for me. How do you feel about people using AI to find potential speaking opportunities?
Yes, use the tools at your disposal. I attended a workshop, oh gosh, almost a year ago now. So it was like in its infancy at that time, or at least in this use of it. But they were saying how to use GPT to fill out a speaker application. So call
Mm-hmm.
for speakers is something you should be actively searching for if you know you want to get on more stages. But there's usually a long application process where you have to complete an RFP, a request for
Hmm.
proposal. These are for the bigger annual events and conferences and things like that. It can take a significant amount of time for you to fill out these proposals. Chat can reduce your time commitment from what, like 2 hours to like 20 minutes, something like that. It's crazy.
It is.
That many applications for that are crazy. But what I will say is chat can't tell you what your signature speech is. Chat can't tell you how your topic addresses their needs. You still need to figure that out on your own before you use chat.
I completely agree. I always use it as a research tool, but I need to fine tune whatever it is. Now, I have, because I talk about a few different things, I do have like, I'd say like two perfectly signature talks that I can talk about that are just, one's list building and lead generation, and one is like sales and marketing. And those two I think go really, really well. And what I will do is when I go to apply, I will have ChatGPT support me in sort of making sure that I fill out the application in the right way, shape, or form. But everything always goes through like my, final touch, I guess, just to make sure that it's all great. What you don't want is you don't want the organizer reading your application going, okay, that's ChatGPT, like unlock the blah, blah, blah. Like that's, I mean, come on. And you're
Please,
giggling, but you
please
know it's
don't let that
true.
show. Don't let your tan line show out there, folks.
No, God, no. Don't let it, nah, don't do anything like that. I I'm a huge proponent also, by the way, of making being a speaker stupid simple, right?
Mhm.
So I'm constantly either being asked to speak or I'm asking to speak, right? And it should be both. I love getting asked and I appreciate the ask. And then I always pursue, right? Because I'm not going to sit on my laurels and wait for people to ask me. I'm definitely going to chase the opportunities that I want to chase. And one of the best things that I do is I make things completely stupid simple. I have my speaker folder or my media folder. I have it in Google Drive. If somebody wants access to everything they need, my bio, my pictures, my link to free gift, all that stuff, it's available to them. I personally decided not to do a one sheet or put it on my website because I update it regularly.
Mm.
And I don't want old information out there
Mm.
or
Interesting.
accessible. Yeah. So I used to have a one sheet and I used to have it on my website, like really statically on my website. Now I do have my talks on my website, but my speaker kit is in a Google Drive because I constantly try and update things. Like I literally updated my bio like on Sunday, just to add a couple things to it. So, and I never want that old bio out there. So I'm constantly doing that. I think that's, for me, I think that's a really great way. Should people invest the time, money, effort in creating sizzle reels or not so much?
I love that you asked this question because 6 months ago, my answer probably would have been a little bit different. I recently created my first ever speaker reel. Yay. It's not
Yay.
available yet, but by the time you hear this podcast, it will be on my website. So yes, all my assets will be on my speaking website. But so here's the thing about sizzle reels. They are an investment. If you are working with a professional videographer, if you are renting a stage, if you are inviting an audience in there, because here's the thing, when you're a professional speaker and you're showing up on other people's stages, they may or may not appreciate you wanting to bring a camera person in to record you on stage, and they may not provide you footage of your speaking. If they do, it's probably very raw and very real, and the audio quality might be pretty poor. So you're not likely to come up with your own footage that's worthy of a speaker reel without hiring someone to do it and creating that stage. So let's be real about that, because some people are like, oh, they're putting fake people in the audience. That's not necessarily the case. You're just creating the situation and the environment. You're still delivering that content. You're just delivering it privately, not publicly. So that's something I want to get out of the way.
Yeah.
But here's why you might need a speaker reel. If you want to get paid to speak, you absolutely should have a speaker reel. Now, I've been paid for years to speak before I created a speaker reel. And here's why. I did mostly virtual speaking. So if you're a person who does both virtual and in-person speaking, it is not as important for you to have a speaker reel. What would make it really important is if you know you want to eventually speak more than you do other things. And so you want to grow your thought leadership. You want to scale your business. You know that you would rather have your admin team handle the behind the scenes and you just want to be the face of your business. You absolutely need to have a speaker reel. You need that footage of you on stage. You lean into those signature speech. If you have TED Talks, if you have other talks that are recorded, don't let that be the only footage of you being on a major stage. So that's when you want to consider upgrading to a speaker reel or scissor reel. But if you're doing mostly virtual and or it's for entrepreneurial groups, it may not be as important for you to have a speaker reel because you're probably not going to work with a bureau. By the way, you would start working with a bureau if you're charging at least $5,000 per speaking engagement, if not more. And we're talking bureaus represent celebrity speakers like the Obamas. Once you reach the Obama level, definitely you should have some speaker reel footage of yourself.
For
Until
sure.
you're there, it's kind of, does it fit within your business needs? It may or may not. You can still get paid to speak without having one. It just is that additional feather in your cap, if you will, of making you look like you command higher fees.
That's really great advice. I love that. I hadn't thought about some of that. And so just before we wrap, I have one last question and it
Mm.
has to do and it has to do with perception. Is or do people still see these TEDx talks as really still like the foundational, amazing, groundbreaking thing that they were at one point? Like TED, like if you did a TED talk, you landed, congratulations, you were somebody. And TEDx, now it seems like a lot of different opportunities are TEDx talks. Do they still have the same gravitas or not so much?
I love that word gravitas and how you can just insert it into a conversation, Jenny. That's brilliant. Uh, I love people who are just so good with their English. Anyway, so TEDx
I
talks.
have an English degree and I'm not going to tout it, but I do.
I love it. I love my English people. Okay, so here's the deal. TEDx. I don't have one. I know people who have done TEDx before and it was a bad experience for them. Here are some ways it may be a bad experience for you. There are a dime a dozen. If
Hmm.
you don't get accepted into your local one, you can literally apply anywhere in the country or internationally. And I know people who have applied internationally and still been rejected. You can apply for a TEDx up to 8 times average before you get accepted. And it's a very limited style of talk. So you only have so many minutes to complete it. You have to use PowerPoint slides. Most professional speakers do not use PowerPoint slides. So you're doing a very specific type of talk. It's almost like your first book, right? If you're an author and you're listening, you're like, okay, my first book was not my best work. That's kind of what a TEDx might be. It might be you just discovering what your talk would be. It might be you going through a process, getting some coaching, getting the raw footage or the real footage on YouTube before you're available to afford a videographer for your speaker reel. There are benefits to TEDx and you can post it on your social. You can get found for it. It's probably going to do better in search for you than anything else that you've got out there currently because video performs better. Here's the bad news about TEDx, and I work with a lot of coaches. So if you're a coach and a consultant, I hate to say this, but I've heard most recently in the past year from other people who've delivered TEDx talks and have a relationship with the organizer who brought them on. If you put coach on your TEDx application, they might automatically deny you because there's been a backlash against coaches who might have this appearance of being overly promotional, overly salesy, or at the very worst case scenario, not having an idea worth sharing, which I think is a disservice to the coaching community personally.
Mm.
But I have heard this from people who have connections with people in the TEDx industry, people who organize these TEDx. And lastly, I just want to say in my local city here in Edina, Minnesota, we have a youth version of TEDx. Now, that's not to say if we have a youth version of it that means that you're no better speaker than a 10-year-old or whatever. But the fact that, kids younger and younger are approaching this as an opportunity for them and they don't have anything to sell,
Hmm.
it just tells me something. It tells me that it has a very particular purpose. It's a great way to share your message, but it may not be the best way for you to grow your business through your message.
Thank you for being so honest about it. Because for a long time, TED Talks, TEDx Talks, they were like the thing. If you had one of that, you'd made it. And I just think there's been, like most things, there has been just a little bit too much of a dilution on
I agree.
that sort of platform. And I think that speaks to me, if we can have a platform that doesn't dilute, that has that gravitas, that has the sort of the what's the right word? Now I can't think of the word, but the almost the I don't know, elevation, I guess, of what that event is, and that it's hard to get into and only the best speakers do, and so on. If you don't dilute it, then that becomes the bar, the thing that you want to achieve. And then, I think that has to stay in the speaking world. I like it for the summit world too. I mean, most people don't think it's in summits, but it actually is. That's a conversation for another day. But I really appreciate you sharing all that information. Now, we're going to have everything in the show notes, but why don't you tell us where people can connect with you and find you to get to know you and see what it is that you do?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to connect with anyone. I mentioned a few resources during the course of this podcast. So if you're still listening to us at the end, yes, you get a gold medal for listening through the end, but you also get access to how to connect with me and how to get those resources I talked about. So email me if you want that free handout of where to find speaking engagements that I mentioned. If you want my template, my signature speech template to get you started on the last speech you will ever write, that will be available in the show notes. And my website is waitlistchronicles.com. So if you want to connect with me directly, you can do that. And you'll also find me on the socials. I don't spend as much time on places outside of LinkedIn and Instagram. So those are my two favorite ones. If you want to connect me outside of there, it's email.
Yep. You and I are the same that way. It's just
Yeah.
that's where I play. I don't really go to the other places. The Book of Faces is just, for a little bit of scrolly time. But that's about it.
Yes, I'm on Facebook. If you really, really spend all your time on Facebook, I'm there. You may not
No.
see a lot of my content on there.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I think there's been this big shift on that side. But again, that's a
Very
topic for
much.
another day. Jenn, I'm so glad we got to do this. It's been a long time coming. You and I have been chatting back and forth about having you on since Acquire basically started. So glad we got the opportunity to make it happen. Really grateful for all your support. And you're always so incredible on my socials. You're always liking my stuff and saying hi. And I really, really am grateful. So make sure that you're checking out everything that Jenn is doing. She's fantastic at what she does. And she helped me. So I'm really happy about that. And for everybody listening to the podcast, thank you so much for listening to Acquire. If you like what you're hearing, please do make sure to leave a comment, leave a review. Let me know what it is that you'd like to hear. And as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, if you want to make sure that your next upcoming online event is going to go exactly how you want it to go, then go and get my free guide. The link is in the chat box. The link is in the show notes, and it is the 5 steps to having a successful event. You can go and grab that. It's a great guide, has all sorts of detail in it, and you can grab that now. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.